Does the still reigning greatest thinker in the world, Slavoj Žižek, make a big mistake with his current and persistent, as though he were some kind of low-level blue-collar worker on a train staring at constantly casting lustful glances perpetually at some middle-aged woman who just merely wanted to retire from her life as a prostitute? So again, Zizek has persisted in this argument that Dostoevsky has made the greatest blunder by writing this character. Of course, it wasn't Dostoevsky himself, but Ivan in the Brothers Karamazov, who has said, if there is no God, then everything is permitted. So in fact, I think everything wrong in Zizek's reading can be reduced to one principle. It's the difference between what Dostoevsky says from a Russian Orthodox perspective, where the theology is not so important, where truth is not so important, where Christ is the center in everything. Dostoevsky has said, if it came to it, if truth turned out to be against Christ, I would stay with Christ. So this isn't something that you would hear say by Thomas Aquinas or by a Catholic. So everything Zizek is saying about the Dostoevsky position and about Freud and Lacan's position is based on exactly what Heidegger calls this ontotheological problem. So it's that he always has to have a position which is positive and revealing a positive injunction. You must carry out this act in the name of the agathon, in the name of the good. So this is his whole argument is floating around this very difficulty, which negates Hegel and shows the faults in Hegel and shows the faults in the tradition, so far as it's understood as having this ontotheological difficulty. And Hegel still has this beginning with the concept of the good playing a very specific role in the beginning of his logic and in his system as a whole. Because he begins with the concept of being, and being is exactly the fullness of the good. Deprivation of being is exactly the lack of good, and the end of history, or the absolute, where all the moments have been played through, is exactly this fullness of time, or the fullness of being. So Zizek gives the example of the current woke LGBTQ culture, which has actually just suffered a major, and I think a fair setback with the saying that somebody who designs web designs does not have to accept a contract from a protected category covering the whole of what those long extending acronyms, this LGBTQ, etc., covers. There was a scene in Giant in the Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor film. Dennis Hopper was in it when he was relatively young. I think James Dean was at the smaller part. Where at the end, it's in Texas, there's a kind of the Rock Hudson character is an oil baron, has a kid who's mestizo, or half Mexican Texan and half Caucasian, and his son marries a Mexican girl, and so then there's a fight in a restaurant over her being refused service, and then at the end of the fight, the waiter comes over and hangs a kind of sign, like a closing sign, over his neck with a little brass chain, and on it says, "We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone." So I think this is a break in what Zizek is in this so-called tyranny of the progressive political correctness, in that sense. So probably it's a positive thing, but this is the example that Zizek is giving as if God is dead. So if you say everything is permitted, there's no genders, etc., God is dead, then the so-called political correctness comes in, and therefore the if God is dead actually means stronger strictures come in than when there was a God. But this keeps moving in this circuit where we assume whatever the good has to be something that has a positive existence that's available to us already in some form, that can take an example such as in exactly what I just said.